gosh, how good was it to hear from Arlene and to have her back with us. Thank you so much, Arlene, for updating all of us and just for continually every Sunday sharing your gift with us and giving us the space to be able to enter into a time of worship and reflection. And so yeah, it's so good to have you back, and so amazing to just hear how you have been held and loved and taken care of during a really, really difficult time. And we just want you to know that we will continue to be here for you and standing alongside you as you continue to heal and to move forward. So obviously it is a new year, and along with that now comes the time. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I've been, you open social media, or just the messaging that's all around us whenever New Year's comes is, it's all the talk about setting goals and looking ahead to the new year and choosing your word for the year, or setting resolutions, and kind of the whole like new year, new me, thing that a lot of people, talk about this time of year. And all of these things are fine and good. And I think it's important to live with intentionality, and it's important to set goals for ourselves and do the kinds of things that will lead us toward becoming more and more of who we want to be, and setting goals for how we want to live and how we want to show up in the world. I think all of those things are so good. However, today, I don't really want to focus on that part of kind of new beginnings or a new year, or setting resolutions, or talking about the future or goals. Rather, I want to spend some time today talking about reflecting and the importance of reflecting on the past and remembering where we have been and learning to find value in those things. I've been spending a lot of time lately thinking about the importance of reflecting on where we've been, on remembering the path that we have walked and the ways that we have changed, remembering the struggles we have had, remembering the lessons that we've learned, and also remembering the joy that we've experienced and the good things that have come to us throughout the past year, even though sometimes those feel a little bit harder to find for some of us when it's been a hard season. But I think for a lot of times it's a lot easier for us to want to think about the good, but a lot of times we don't want to think about the pain and the struggle and the hard times. And so today I want to talk about just, not just remembering the good, but also the importance of sitting with the not so good, sitting with our pain and our sorrow and our struggle. And I know my tendency is to want to avoid that. I don't like to think about things that are painful or that make me uncomfortable or that hurt my heart, or that grieve me. Like, it's hard to face into those things. But there is power in reflecting on the difficult things as well as the good things. And as we talk about this, as we talk about, sitting with our pain and sitting with the difficult circumstances, I also want to be clear that, I realize there are some experiences for a lot of us that are so deeply painful and traumatic that we need the help of a therapist or a counselor, some form of mental health professional, in order to process those things. So I'm not suggesting that you just revisit trauma or sit with really, really, really deeply painful things that you need to have the help of a medical health professional, a mental health professional, to work through those things. I know there are things that I know I need to process with my therapist. And also within community with those who love me, rather than try to process those things on my own. And the important thing is that I make the time and space to allow myself to reflect and remember and process. And I know sometimes when there's a new year, it's really easy for us to want to charge ahead and to leave everything else behind and forget about, especially, 2020 and now 2021, it just feels like it's been such a wild couple of years, and it's easy for us to want to just put everything behind us, to forget it ever happened, and to just, charge forward into a new year. But I think that we will miss something if we do that, if we don't take the time to honestly reflect and remember where we have been, both good and bad. There's an Instagram account that I follow that is called Black Liturgies, and it's ran by Cole Arthur Riley, and she posted a liturgy for the new year. And if you're on Instagram and you don't follow that account, I would highly recommend. She is always posting just the most beautiful, honest, and hopeful things. And she posted this yesterday. She said, "Hope is tethered to remembrance. We don't move forward by forgetting. Hold space for every joy and every sorrow of the year." And I read that and I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. That hope is tethered to remembrance. That even, could it be that in some way, even by remembering the struggles, even by remembering the painful things, and also remembering the joyful things and the good, is it possible that in doing so, that is inextricably connected to hope, that our ability to be able to hope for what's next and to hope for the future is tied to our ability to honestly and truthfully remember where we've been. And, I feel like we've all been saying this for the past couple of years, but 2021 was a hard year for me. I know that it's been a hard year for many of you. I even just this week, really the past few weeks, have spent time in conversation with several of you who are carrying really heavy grief, who have had to walk through the death of a loved one, who have walked through scary diagnoses, who are struggling with people that you love, who personally you feel like it's just been a really difficult time. And so I know that there are many of us that are watching that would say, yeah, it's been a hard, hard year. And I also know, and I've experienced and talked to some of you over the past week who have experienced times of radical joy and celebration, of miraculous things that have happened, of healing, of God's provision, of protection and safety, and things that you have walked through that have been cause for great celebration and joy. And I love how Arlene, even not even knowing what we were talking about today, how she, in her message to us this morning, kind of talked about those things, about how she has carried much sorrow and stress, and that there is much to be celebrated in the fact that her surgery was successful and that she has felt so seen and loved and taken care of. And it's just a reminder that it's both and, not either or, that we embrace both the joy and the pain. And I have found that it is in, truly in reflecting and remembering that I find a source of hope. And when I reflect on the pain and the struggle, it allows me an opportunity to let myself feel it all and to grieve so that I eventually can move through it. One thing that my therapist works with me about is about being in your present moment or circumstances, and being in whatever you're feeling in that moment and sitting with that without judgment, allowing yourself to experience and to feel whatever it is that you feel in that moment with no judgment. And it's in allowing ourselves to process and to grieve and to feel the pain that we can eventually move through it. And when I reflect on the joy and the good things and the provision and just the times of peace and the times where I've experienced love from other people, those times serve as a reminder that even in the midst of the hardest of seasons, that God is still there as a source of joy, that God's presence can be found even in heartache, which that can feel kind of abstract. But for me, I experience God's presence when I'm going through a hard time and the people that I love are there for me. That, to me, that is the presence of God, is through the people who are showing up in my life over and over again. So recently I actually had a really profound experience that I've been wanting to share with all of you. And I feel like it fits in with this idea of remembrance and reflecting on the past and on past experiences. And this experience has been such a important and good teacher for me in this area of the importance of reflecting on what has been in order to find hope and to move forward. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege of going on an anti-racism pilgrimage of sorts in Montgomery, Alabama. And it was called a legacy trip. And this is a trip that I believe there's several of them that are happening in 2022. But a woman by the name of Tina Strawn, she's an anti-racism educator and podcaster, Black queer woman, just an all-around beautiful human being. And she started these trips a few years ago. And basically it was about 10 of us, and we spent 3 days together taking a hard and honest look at the past with the purpose of allowing that to move us toward creating a better world. So we gathered in Montgomery, Alabama, and we spent some time. We went and we actually walked the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, where the civil rights protesters marched for voting rights and were met with brutal force by state troopers. We visited the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, where the names of 4,400 Black men, women, and children are memorialized after having been lynched at the hands of white people between 1877 and 1950. And those are just the ones that were documented. We spent several hours at the Legacy Museum, and all of these were all founded by the Equal Justice Initiative with Bryan Stevenson. But we spent several hours at the Legacy Museum, which is this unbelievable museum that tells the devastating story of one of the most evil parts of our history, from the transatlantic slave trade to domestic slavery to segregation and Jim Crow, to mass incarceration, and also highlighting the civil rights movement and all of the incredible and amazing leaders who stood up and continued the fight for justice. And we spent time together then processing the things that we had seen, and we bore witness with one another. We talked about hard truths, and we imagined together the ways in which we can all work to build a better, more just world where every single person is truly free from the bonds of white supremacy and racism. And then in the midst of such heartbreak and pain and ugly, ugly truth, because there were so many things that were so hard to look at. There were things that almost brought me to my knees. It was so heavy, and there was so much grief and so much reckoning with just an ugly, ugly, ugly part of America's past. But in the middle of all of that, we also made plenty of space to honor those who came before us, who put their bodies on the line to fight for liberation, those whose voices and who stood up for justice, even though it could cost them immensely. And in the middle of the pain, in the middle of facing into that ugliness, there was also so much hope and beauty and determination to be found because of people who rose up and refused to settle for anything less than the peace and freedom that justice brings. It was by far one of the most profound experiences of my life, one that I think every person in America should experience. And I'm looking forward in the future to sharing more about it, and also sharing with all of you ways that you can be involved, to give you information if you would personally like to ever go on one of these trips. But as I kind of have sat back over the past few weeks since I came home and have really been sitting with so much that I saw and heard and experienced, the one of the main things that I am carrying with me is just knowing that the key to true liberation and peace is not to ignore the hard and the ugly places, but rather to acknowledge them, to sit with them, to repent, and to learn from them. That we can never heal and find true liberation if we refuse to take an honest look at our deepest places of pain. In the same way that our nation can never heal, can never move beyond the grips of white supremacy and racism until we acknowledge and recognize and reckon with our past. In that same way, it's like that for us with all of the different hard and ugly places in our own personal lives, that we can never move forward into true liberation, into true peace, until we take an honest look at our deepest places of pain, till we remember, till we sit with them, till we reflect on them. And then this way, when we do that, when we take both, because we took an honest look at that, but we also took an honest look at all of the hope of the freedom fighters and the people the civil rights activists who rose up and said, even if it costs us our very lives, we are going to fight for justice. And so just like that, in this way, we can take both our moments of joy and our moments of victory and goodness and our moments of pain and heartache and suffering, and we can hold it all together and then let the whole of our experiences lead us forward. And this doesn't mean that we live in shame or that we allow ourselves to become swallowed up by the grief, but rather we accept it for what it is. We tell the truth about it, and only then can we move forward from it. This experience that I had in Montgomery, it held the both and. It was devastating and hopeful. There was grief and joy. There was repentance and a call to action to make a better world. And I believe there truly is so much power to be found when we practice reflection and remembrance. It's important for us to reflect and to remember and to look at those places of our pain and to ask, okay, I've said this before, I do not for 1 minute, believe that God gives us suffering, that God sends suffering into our lives, or that God sends pain into our lives to teach us something. However, that doesn't mean that suffering and pain can't be teachers. We can't, from out of those places of pain and suffering, we can find lessons to be learned. We can ask our grief, what are you teaching me? You can ask our anger, what are you teaching me right now? What things can I learn from this? So as I move forward in my life, I can take those things with me. It's interesting because peppered throughout all of Scripture, there are so many instances, particularly in the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, of people having these experiences, and then either they would build an altar of remembrance, or they would name the place where they were at when they had this experience in order to serve as a reminder of what they had went through and what they had experienced. And there's a story in Genesis that came to mind as I was getting this message ready for today that I want to read to all of you about an instance where someone does this, where they have this experience and then they name the place where they were in order for it to be a place of remembrance. And so there was a man by the name of Jacob, and there was one night where Jacob, he was on his own. He was left alone in the wilderness. And this is what the scriptures say. It says, Jacob was left alone. This is from Genesis 32, starting in verse 24. And it says, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. In some translations, it says an angel. Many people, as scholars and theologians talk about this, they refer to Jacob wrestling with God. And it says, when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go until you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And then the man said, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose up upon him, and as he passed through, he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at the thigh muscle. So we have Jacob, who is having this experience with God, wrestling with God. And we don't all the way know what he was wrestling for, what was going through his mind, what were the things that were going on for him in that very moment. But I think, like Jacob, I'm sure that many of us have either had an experience or are currently in a season where we feel like we are wrestling with God, or where we are struggling and wrestling with how to come to terms with our circumstances. Maybe for you, God feels so far away, and you're looking around at all the things that are happening in your life, and you cannot find God in the middle of it. And you're just trying so hard to even sense that God could possibly be near. Maybe your current circumstances are so hard and they feel so unfair, and you've been having it out with God because you're so angry. Maybe you're in a place where you, like Jacob, are holding on to God with all your might and refusing to let go until God shows up. Maybe you've been fighting and wrestling to not have to look at the painful places because you're afraid of what will come next, or that it will be too much for you to handle. Wherever it is that you find yourself, may I suggest that as you move through whatever experiences and circumstances you are facing, that you would give yourself space to name that place and to reflect on it and to remember. And this is what I want to invite all of us into as we move forward into 2022, that before we launch into making goals and plans and thinking about the future, that before we do that, that we would pause for a little bit and that we would make room for both the joy and the pain, that we would reflect on the victory and the struggle, that we would allow every part of our experience to be our teacher, that we would slow down and make time and space for honest reflection on where we have been before we rush ahead into what's next. That you would give yourself permission to slow down and really grieve your losses even when it's painful. That you would also give yourself permission to truly celebrate the wins and to soak in all of the joyful experiences. I know sometimes when we are grieving or suffering, we feel guilty for feeling joy, or when those around us who are suffering, we feel guilty for feeling joy. But I would say, no, there's room for both. There's room for both. It doesn't have to be either or. It's supposed to be both and, that we embrace the pain and the joy, that we would hold both of these things together because there is room for both and both are necessary. That we would, as we have said goodbye to 2021 and we launch into 2022, that we would, like Cole Arthur Riley said, from the Black Liturgy's account, that we would remember that hope is tethered to remembrance. That we would know that that is the key to having hope for what's ahead, is by remembering where we have been, remembering how far we have come, remembering that even in the middle of our pain and our suffering, that we are not alone, that even if you can't feel God, that you would maybe learn to see God in those around you who love you and who are holding you up, that we would take that time and create that space for reflection and remembrance. And then we can move forward into setting goals and planning for our future and looking forward to what's ahead. But let's first take some time to reflect and to remember. Well, that is all that I have for you today. I would love, if anybody wants to, over the next few minutes, if you would in the chat share any of your current reflections. Maybe there's some things that you've been reflecting on, things you would like to reflect on, things you would like to remember. We kind of keep the chat open for like 10 minutes after after we're done with the service. So if any of you want to hang around for a little bit and just find some solidarity in one another's experiences, if you want to share some things that you've learned, maybe share some struggles that you would love people to enter into with you. That's what church is. We are community. We are the body together. We are in this with one another. We are not in this alone. So I love you all so very much. Go ahead and if you'd like to spend a few minutes in the chat, finding community with one another and finding solidarity with one another. And other than that, we will see you back here next Sunday. I hope you all have a fantastic day and a great week. Go in peace. And now is the awkward time where, because of technical difficulties, I don't know how to switch to the next scene. So I'm still here. So
Sorry, I'm watching the service over here.
That's okay. Can you come help me?
Yep.
Love you all so much.
Hi, everyone. Hold on. Give me 1 second.
Oh, no.
I can't locate that file.
Won't locate any of it.
Can't locate.
Well, that's fine.
No.
Maybe, we'll just hang out here for a minute. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
This is totally normal, everyone. Just, you got this. 3 service videos, new countdown. There's the preview with music. There we go. Open file. Open file. Well, hi, everyone.
Adrian said tech guy is grounded. Do you have sock puppets? I wish. I would totally use them if I had them.
I have no clue.
Or if I had like a dance prepared, I could do that for you. But
listen,
like I could learn some TikTok. I need to learn some TikTok dances so next time I'm prepared, so I can just do that.
It's not. Why isn't it?
I have no idea.
Listen, everyone. 2022, if it's going to be like this, we're going to need to have some words. So
is there a way to
we could just end the stream.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm so glad. Amanda I totally forgot to mention that. There is a eKids Connect crew happening at 11 a.m. Amanda just posted the Zoom link. So if you have a preschooler or an elementary age kid, you can go ahead and hop on for that, and they can connect with other kiddos their age and hang out for the Connect crew. Amanda said you do need to learn some TikTok dances. Only if you do. Here's the deal. Amanda and I are going to work on some together, and so that we can bring you our dance duets should we ever have an issue with, this again. Aw, Anna. I love you too, Anna. You're such a little sweetie. Well, does anybody have anything they want to share in the chat? Because, And here's also, Dan's doing things, so I could just disappear at any moment. So if that happens, just go with it, y'all. Just go with it.
Why is that file so... I don't know. I don't know why.
So what do we do? We just have to finish the stream?
Well, let me try one more thing.
Okay.
What happens if I try to open this file?
I don't know.
I know things, people, and this should be working, and it's not. I'm gonna have to really dive into it and figure out why it's not working.
You know what? It's all good. So.
Yep.
Yeah. We love you, and we are going to abruptly. Don't cut me off in the middle of me talking.
I would never.
Yes, you will. Anyway, we love you. We'll see you next week.